Hello and welcome to The Round So Far, brought to you by Amy. I'm Riley Beveridge. This is Kate McCarthy. Kate, we've had some close games this weekend. Let's start at GMHBA Stadium. It was a wet and windy afternoon down in Geelong with a potential top four matchup, and the Cats got over the line.
Yeah, look, it did blow out to a 24-point margin, but it was a pretty tight and scrappy game down at GMHBA Stadium. Obviously, not conditions that the Gold Coast Suns would be accustomed to, nor I think they enjoyed, but it was the ability for the Cats to just pile on some goals late, which really did blow out the margin. Stengel kicked 4, and in the fourth quarter, they really did just dominate and assert their ascendancy on this Gold Coast Suns team and got the job done again down at Cardinia Park. And the Gold Coast Suns still yet to win down there in their 9 trips down the highway.
There's a lot of people at Geelong yet to taste a win in Geelong. The Cats kicking 4 of the last 5 goals. There was a flashpoint late in this game with Tom Stewart's bump on Gold Coast skipper Noah Anderson. Anderson was forced from the field as a result of this. He went for scans after the game on a chest injury, completely cleared of concussion. So nothing wrong here with the head in terms of either the whiplash, making contact with the head, or the head hitting the ground as a result of this incident. Do you think he's got anything to worry about from a match review perspective?
I don't personally, but with MRO you're never quite sure. But I just think it was a very, very good bump. Asserted himself on the player when he attacked the ball, but I just think he didn't get his head. Yes, the margin for error is slight with that, but I don't think he made any contact. As we've seen, there's no concussion issues to come out of it. I just think it was a good hip and shoulder and probably one of the best bumps we've seen for the year.
Well, throughout this game, Geelong left an extra man in defence. Gold Coast let them do that. Damien Hardwick was asked after the game in terms of whether or not he thought about matching up on the 7th defender and didn't want to do it. He said he was comfortable playing 6v7, but in the end it proved the difference for Geelong because they ran the ball out of defence quite often.
Yeah, we know how, I guess, they love to set up their defence with the spare defender behind the ball. Oftentimes we see a certain player in Tom Stewart be the dominant force back there, as we're seeing a few of his highlights, but it was a fairly even share as to who got the intercept possession. So Henry had 10, Stewart 8, Humphreys had 5, De Koning 5, even Holmes and Atkins had 5 each. So it was a different role for each of them, and they were happy if they were found as the spare to just fly. I think it was a bit of the tale of two parts for this one. It was really poor ball use going inside forward 50 from the Gold Coast Suns, but if Geelong, you're going to allow them to have a spare that flies, they're going to make you pay, and then they're able to rebound off that half-back line and set up their attack from there.
Let's get to your Saturday king, Kate, and it is Tom Atkins, the tackle king at Geelong.
He is the tackle king. He's the tackle king of the competition at the moment. He had 23 disposals, 8 clearances, 8 tackles, 6 score involvements, and he's just everywhere. I think he's a player that, with the superstars that you have through the midfield for Geelong, he does tend to fly under the radar, but he allows the likes of Bailey Smith, who we didn't see tonight, which we'll get to in a minute, but Brian Myers, Max Holmes, they're the metres gained players at Geelong. The reason they can be those players is because of what we see Atkins do in and under. And coming into this round, he's laid 124 tackles in 13 games. And since we've had champion data in the competition to take those stats, no player has ever had that by round 13 in an AFL season to this point. So
remarkable, isn't it?
Tackling machine he is.
Yeah, can't believe that from Tom Atkins, an unsung hero down there at the Cattery. Bailey Smith, as you touched on, Kate, was a late out from this one. So this is last week against West Coast. Feels at his hamstring late in that game against the Eagles. Comes off a 6-day break travelling back from Perth. Felt at it before the game as well. Didn't take part. Ted Closey came into this one and played the match as a late inclusion for Bailey Smith. They've got Essendon next week. They've got Brisbane the week after that. Then they have their bye. So 2 weeks until that bye for Geelong. So you have to wonder whether or not Bailey Smith makes it back before that point in time. Let's get to Canberra now, where the Giants got beaten, upset by Port Adelaide, who kicked the final 3 goals of this game. So Jesse Hogan kicks this one here. That's early in the last quarter. It gets the Giants within a point, but then so many errors from a side that normally avoids these types of mistakes, and it allowed Port Adelaide back into the match. Yeah,
and a player that's usually very good with their ball use, Lockie Whitfield, that was a very costly turnover. Obviously the goal then to directly result in it. And then another really costly error here is O'Halloran, who's run the block on Wines, not knowing that that Wines had actually nominated as the ruck in that scenario. So free kick in the ruck goes, Wines makes him pay, and then another holding the ball free kick here to seal it. But It was the Giants' mistakes, really. Port fought hard. You can't take anything away from them. It was a spirited performance. We needed to see something from them, and they were able to find it. But it was not the best ball use, not the best defence, and not the best, performance that we've seen from the Giants, especially in Canberra, which they love to make their fortress there.
They certainly do. Port had lost 4 straight games going into this one, Kate. The Giants, as you mentioned, were held scoreless in the third term. It was only the third time in the last 10 years that they'd been held scoreless. They only kicked 1 goal for the entire second half. Here was some of the errors that led to that scoreless third term because they just couldn't get anything going their way, the Giants.
No, they couldn't get any matchups that they wanted to utilise ahead of the footy, and when they did have the opportunities, they just squandered them. Some really poor ball use coming out of the back half, and then really poor connection in that attacking mid position. Even this one here, there's multiple players out inside forward 50, and the one spot that you probably can't afford to kick that ball is exactly where Brown ended up kicking that, and it was a direct turnover to Port Adelaide. So definitely squandered some opportunities, but it was all over the field. It wasn't just their connection in their forward half, it was the back half as well. And
a worry for the Giants with captain Toby Green subbed out at halftime, having copped this brutal knee to the back hip sort of area. It was a bad corky from Ilir. He tried to run it off. He couldn't do it. Only 42% game time. So a watch on Toby Green ahead of next week's clash because that looked an awful injury for the Giants skipper.
Yeah, it did look very painful, and obviously probably one of the worst spots that you want to get a corky is the, I think it was about 3 degrees there or something
great.
like that. Felt like a lot cooler as well, so not the best conditions to try and keep a corky warm.
What about Friday night's game? Adelaide beating Brisbane, and it was down to their last quarter. They were absolutely fantastic in this final term, the Crows. 10 points up, 17 points down at three-quarter time, and then 10 points up halfway through the last quarter.
Yeah, well, they rallied. The stat that they led, which was the most important stat, was the tackles, 26-11. Jordan Dawson, he really just made his presence known. He wore a hard tag all night from Josh Dunkley, went forward, still took a very important mark, kicked a very important goal, and they were just able to find something when they needed it. The Crows, and Ben Keys kicked 3.
Fantastic.
He's been the nemesis of Brisbane since they let him go, and he's not only, we use the term barometer so much in the football world now, but he's genuinely become someone that when they've needed a player to step up, he's been the one, and he does it in a way that brings the rest of the group with him.
What about the Keys play around the ground? Because the way he was able to negotiate his role inside 50 was really fantastic throughout the course of it.
Yeah, well, this was early in the game, and he was able to find himself. This is a complete defensive breakdown from the Brisbane Lions. Just leave him in that much space, and then this is later in the game. The goal that we saw at the end there where Fogarty gets the tap on, that's him right next to Hugh McCluggage there, works around the stoppage. Berry, who's the winger, comes into the stoppage and doesn't affect it, which leaves that space free. So there's essentially 2 players that could have got that job done. Neither of them did. Keys kicks the goal that ends up being the match winner. So you think you make a mistake like that, you review it, you watch tape at halftime in the rooms, that needs to be addressed, and it's another lapse in the same player in a very similar position that's cost them 2 goals.
Adelaide was fantastic in the last quarter. Brisbane was not. They had 20 inside 50s and kicked 0 goals 8, compared to Adelaide, who had 8 inside 50s and kicked 5 goals straight. That was the difference in the game.
It was, and post-match, Chris Fagan said, well, we should have won that game, and really with what we're seeing here, some of the opportunities they should have. But on the flip side to that, Matthew Nicks said, well, you know, we were lucky to win the game, but we've been very unlucky to lose a number of games in the past couple of seasons. And some of the misses that we've seen, so Zach Bailey missed a couple. He is someone that's really become a clutch player for the Brisbane Lions. And this one from Lachie Neale, I think you could give him 9 shots out of 10 and he'd make all of those, except for that one that he missed. And Zach Bailey again, this one not making the distance. And it was little errors like that. I feel like at multiple times the Lions felt like they had to be the player that was the one to kick the goal. And that option there from Zach Bailey, I'm not sure whether he was trying to square that up or whether he was having a shot. And because he was in those 2 minds, kicked it way too close to the goal square, and it was just an easy spoil behind. But the Crows, they did the work early. They put a lot of pressure on the Lions in that final term, and ultimately they were the deserving winners despite the missed opportunities from the Lions.
It felt like a finals game in June, didn't it, Kate? All right, let's get to Brisbane's form, because across the last 5 weeks, yes, they've won a couple of them. They beat Hawthorn. That was their most convincing performance. The other win against Essendon, that was a much depleted Essendon. They hadn't looked great. You got the draw against North, you got the loss at home to Melbourne, and then the loss to Adelaide. Where do you think the reigning Premier find themselves right now?
Oh, I think they'd be probably the first to admit they're definitely not playing their best football currently. But the beauty of what they've done is being able to scrap together wins when potentially they haven't played 4 quarters. And I think they probably haven't played a full 4-quarter effort potentially since St Kilda, you could argue, Hawthorn. But apart from that, that's 2 games where they've probably put their best foot forward and they've been able to still bank the wins, which puts them in a good spot. There's still obviously we're only just halfway through the season, so they've got the time to put the game plan together. But what we're seeing at the moment, they're not at the point that they would like to be, but they've got sort of a fair bit of time on their side to get those little things right, get the scores on the board and put together full 4 quarters performance, because to do what they did last year, that's what they're going to need to do in the back end.
And let's not forget, they finished 5th last year and won it from outside the top 4. So they've shown they can string together a good month of footy, but a massive fortnight ahead with the Giants and the Cats. All right, Kate, we are halfway through the year, so we're going to do a little mid-season stock take from you. I only want short answers here, but I've got a series of questions for you. Starts with, which team has exceeded your pre-season expectations?
I think the Adelaide Crows. I think we all thought they'd be good, but they're probably exceeding that.
All right, most disappointing?
Carlton.
Carlton. Coach of the year so far?
I'm going to have to go either Craig McRae or Damien Hardwick. What he's been able to do at the Suns, just really turn that list around and get who he wants in there and get them firing the way he wants them.
What about your coach most under pressure?
I think Michael Voss is under a fair bit of pressure at Carlton.
Agreed. Who will win the Brownlow medal from here?
I've got 2 options. I think Jordan Dawson or Nick Dacos.
Okay, if you could have one rule tweak, what are you fixing?
I'm fixing the MRO grading matrix. I think that severe or high grading there needs to be some grey area, whether it's a reportable offence or not. The 0 to 3, there needs to be something in between that.
All right, Giants, Dockers, Bulldogs or Bombers, who makes the finals from here?
I'm going to take 2 of those. I've got the Dockers and the Dogs.
And which 2 teams do you reckon will make the grand final?
I'm going to cheat a little bit and say 3.
3, okay.
I think Collingwood, and then I think currently what we're seeing right now, recency bias, these 2 teams have played 2 good games this round, the Cats and the Crows.
Okay, bold call for the rest of the season?
I think, and this one seems harsh considering they put together a good performance just tonight, but I think Kenny is gone before the end of the season.
Okay, and favourite round so far, host?
Well, recency bias.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, appreciate that. All right, let's get to the MCG now, where Sydney, they finally turned it around. They were sent to the beach on Sunday morning last week, but on this occasion, they just completely took over the game after quarter time.
Well, it's the Kath and Kel Day-Night Cup, and Kel came out on top. Sydney Swans, they got the win. But that goal there that we saw from Dion Prestia, that was 18 minutes into the first quarter. Their next goal did not come until 22 minutes into the fourth. That was 98 minutes. They were held goalless by the Sydney Swans, and they were slow to start, the Swans, and watching it I was thinking, oh, this could go either way, but then you saw the effect of, I guess, the pride that they had on the line from that belting that they copped last week. They turned the pressure numbers around. They were able to control the footy, rebound off half-back. Even Brody Grundy pulled out a little bit of clutch work that kept the ball in, and then had a bit of fun to celebrate that one. But yeah, it was the response we expected from the Swans, but at quarter time with Richmond 6 points up, it was a bit, well, are we going to see this response that we're all expecting? And it did end up coming to the fore. So good on them for being able to regroup and put that together. I
think a tackle count at quarter time would have been worrying for Dean Cox as well. But suddenly they get the win here. It's a steadier. And have a look at their next few games, because these next 5 matches, they could win all of them, really. Port Adelaide, the Western Bulldogs, Fremantle, that's the only top 8 side they play in this run, but it is at home at the SCG. Then St Kilda and North Melbourne. They're about to get Errol Goulden back. They're about to get Tom Papley back. Can they make a late season surge? They've done it so many times before.
I think what we've seen so far, I don't think they can. I think Port Adelaide will be a little bit of a challenge next week, especially what we saw this evening. They're starting to get things back on track, but I mean, they're 2 teams, talking about both of them, that you never know what you're going to get that week. There's been so many teams like that this year, Riley, where one week they'll put together a spirited performance, and then it seems like if the emotion's not there to play on, Port particularly, and the Swans, you're not sure what you're going to get. So a little bit of a defining week next week, I think, for both of those teams to see where they're truly at.
Completely agree. All right, let's get to our Amy Clangers now. Who covers Clangers? Amy does. Let's start with James Jordan, the accidental torp assist. We love this. He did not mean for this to go to a teammate here. Results in one of the best score assists of the year. Maybe Tom Brown a bit later in the game tried to take some tips from James Jordan, because he's gone back from here. He's nearly halfway out. There's absolutely no way he's kicking this after the siren.
And would we say he really hit this any better? Oh, maybe slightly better, but...
Slightly better. Unfortunately, just a few 40 metres short, I reckon, there from Tom Brown. How's the mark of the year effort here from the Western Bulldogs? Their interchange officer down there on the bench.
Well, people say men can't multitask. Have a look at this. Straight back up with the 60 seconds. Mark of the year into I will do my job, and you've only got a minute left. So well done.
I tell you what, we can't there. All right, Thursday night footy at Marvel Stadium, where Hawthorn got the job done against the Western Bulldogs, and it was on the back of Jack Ginnivan's performance because he had just about everything from Jack Ginnivan. He was fantastic again. He had the showboating. Geez, we can be sensitive in this industry sometimes. I absolutely loved that. I've got no issue with it whatsoever. I don't think anyone should.
No.
But he was fantastic after this. And you want to go behind the goals to show us some of his best stuff.
I do. This is what we've been talking about, but this is what we should be talking about Jack Ginnivan. This is the first centre-bounce clearance of the game. He knows his role is to roll up to stoppage, thinks that that's going to be a stoppage there, and then sees the ball is out in space. Works really hard to actually a defensive position to lock this ball in, but because he's worked so hard, ends up getting himself a possession, a free kick and a goal. And then the smarts of it. So he's running that transition pattern again. He sees the ball going to be turned over. Impey takes the mark and he works really hard to find this space out on the open side. Beautiful kick as well by Impey to find him. Similar scenario here. So the ball turns over. He has a look around, surveys where the space is. He sees that there's the long down the line option. You need small representation at the feet. Not good enough for him though. He works out that there's more space and he can work forward and get himself another possession. And that's why I want to talk about his numbers.
Yeah.
So since he was dropped, round 6, went back to the VFL, he found form there, but it was to find that ability to get the run in his legs, which is what we just saw in those clips. And every part of his game has improved there. The disposals, marks, inside 50s, the score involvements. He's been pretty much involved in a whole heap of the chains at Hawthorn when they've hit the scoreboard and the goals himself. So they have plenty of small forwards that can play that role. And we saw Dylan Moore probably perfect it last year, getting up really high. He's still playing in that role. So does McDonald at times, Watson at times too. But Ginnivan, he's the one that's really started to thrive in that role this season. And it's all coming off the back of work rate and footy IQ. And I think for Jack Ginnivan, that's something that people miss a little bit. They see all the showy stuff, they see the celebrations, but this is a man with really high level footy IQ, and we're seeing it on full display with the Hawthorn game plan. Yeah, it was great vision and great numbers there from Jack Ginnivan as well. What about the Western Bulldogs? Because their record against the top 8 leaves a bit to be desired now. So they're 1-6 against sides that are currently in the top 8 this year. This is the top 8 above them, so everyone apart from Hawthorn has multiple wins against fellow top 8 sides. You'd say the Western Bulldogs, that's probably where they should be, in 9th at the moment, because they just can't beat the sides that are above them. Let's be honest, they're 6-6, so their 6 losses have all come against sides that are better, and they've got a relatively softer run second half of the season now. But it is striking just how poor they've been against the sides above them. It is, and I think Thursday night was a real test for both of those teams, so Hawthorn and the Bulldogs, and the Bulldogs had their opportunities in that game. They competed well, but Hawthorn, they outclassed them, they out-tackled them, they out-hunted them, which is something we hadn't seen from the Hawks a whole lot this season, or especially in recent history. The last 4 weeks, their tackle pressure had been poor. But yeah, the Bulldogs, I think the concern for me is their inability to really fight back through what the opposition takes away from them. So Hawthorn, the pressure was up. We were all expecting that. I'm sure the Bulldogs were expecting that, but they couldn't find a way to take the ball out into space, to find some uncontested possession and take the heat out of Hawthorn. Credit to Hawthorn, but the Bulldogs need to be better at finding another avenue when the opponents take away something from them. Geelong 5-2. That's the other thing I took from that graphic there, with another win against Gold Coast today. All right, let's get to the rest of the round now. North Melbourne against West Coast, the first ever AFL game for competitive points in Bunbury. North Melbourne, of course, selling their next 2 home fixtures to Western Australian venues. Carlton against Essendon in the King's Birthday Eve clash, and then King's Birthday, the big freeze game, Melbourne against Collingwood at the MCG. It's going to be a great day there at the G. Kate, thanks for your help throughout tonight's episode. We'll see you next week.